You want to play an RPG, but you're not totally sold on the Dungeons & Dragons aesthetic. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Maybe sci-fi is more your style. Western, low fantasy, anime fantasy, supernatural fantasy, or even romance. Today we're going to take a look at just a few different RPGs so you can get a better idea of what's out there and what it is you really want to play. RPGs offer a variety of ways to explore any number of settings, and all with a different type of mix between actual game and role-playing game. So what's the best one for you? Not every game has the same balance between the two. Some games use very limited pools of dice and rules and numbers that are added into them, while others focus primarily on the story that's being told, the world around you, and what ways you can integrate your character into that world. For this video and others going forward, we'll be using the peanut butter system. The peanut butter system refers to games with very detailed mechanics and rules and addition and subtraction, sometimes division, as crunchy. And the ones that are focused more on gameplay, interaction, role-playing with your fellow players, and everything like that as smooth. So, without further ado, let's just go ahead and dip right into it. Most RPGs are going to find some balance between crunchy and smooth, because the two pieces work together very well, just like with peanut butter. Even if you have crunchy, there's still smooth bits in between, obviously. I'll be doing somewhere between 70-30, 50-50, things like that, a percentage to figure out, how much mechanics are going to go into the game and how much you're going to need to focus on your role-playing abilities and your acting and improvising and having fun like that. Now, of course, we have to start with the granddaddy of them all, Dungeons & Dragons. So, we're currently in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and I think it's a pretty solid addition to the game, all things considered. Dungeons & Dragons has a lot of things going for it. Ease of use, accessibility, notoriety, everybody knows it. It's a great gateway into tabletop games, but it's not necessarily the best for everyone. I know I personally get a little bored with the rules and the mechanics of my character, where I have more fun throwing extra things in there, being a player and getting into it. But when it comes to the rules, it's kind of just throw the die, see if you get 20. If it does, everybody goes crazy. If you get 1, oh my god, something terrible happens. Other than that, everything else is kind of, nowadays, just pass, fail, yeah, kind of pass, no, it's a little bit harder, but you're still stuck between that barrier of 1 and 20 on the 20-sided die, where eventually characters are going to wonder, well, what happens if it's this high, or what happens when I have a plus 10 in something, and I roll a 19, that's 29, well, you only needed 18, so you're kind of stuck there. Now, ease of use and the simple rules system is definitely the feature and the idea of 5th edition D&D. They wanted to bring in as many people as possible to get it out there, to get it popular, especially after a much more crunchy system they used in 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons has a long-running history of being too complicated for just anyone to jump into, and that's a stigma that gets thrown onto it a lot of the time. Oh, I've got to do math. Oh, math. So they really focused on making it simple, easy, and now they have things like the D&D Beyond character creator, where you can jump on and create your character and have it guide you step by step through, and you're ready to go with any group you can find. But how exactly does it line up on the peanut butter scale? So, you've got a rule system that's basically stripped down from other editions of D&D. It's very streamlined, it's effective, but a lot of the mechanics get skewed for people jumping into the game with no prior context, or DMs that are new to the game that just want to throw it together and haven't gotten into the numbers because they've watched other groups play it and they only see the fun parts, they don't see the mechanics, the numbers that go into it. Now on the smoother side of things, you kind of run into an issue with Dungeons & Dragons. The system is kept so generic that it doesn't fit any one type of game in particular. No game setting. This isn't the world of Avatar with its very clearly defined magic system. This isn't any other fantasy book that you've read. Dresden Files has its magic described, anything by Brandon Sanderson. It's none of those. The system is kind of kept generic and open so that it can fit into any number of settings that they've used before. Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, Eberron. But with each of these, there are slight little hitches in the system that kind of get overlooked. Now, if you get the actual campaign book for some of these settings, it flows a lot more smoothly, but they seem to be focusing on Forgotten Realms, which has a background with the weave of magic, a web of magic that stretches here and there and has gaps and openings, and that's almost untouched in what I've seen from the original book. So once again, you've got to adapt your game and your magic system in order to work with magic, which is part of fantasy genre in general. Okay, so what am I trying to say about Dungeons & Dragons? What I'm trying to say is that I feel like Dungeons & Dragons has an average mix of gameplay mechanics and an average mix of setting, where you've got to find the right setting. You've got to make sure your DM is already playing that setting. Like, oh, I love Eberron, I think it's really cool. Well, we're not playing Eberron today, we're playing Forgotten Realms. Okay, time to do some more reading. I feel like its attempt to be a universal setting makes it very hard to fit into all of these worlds at the same time, and the game becomes weaker because of that. So if I was giving it a rating, I might only give it like 6 out of 10. But as far as the peanut butter scale goes, we're looking at about a 50-50. There's a lot of worlds you can dig into and find a lot of things and develop your character with, and then there's a pretty good rule system that eventually might get bored with, but you could still have a lot of fun with regardless. Now let's take a look at a much more crunchy system. Right here I've got the DC Universe role-playing game, the old one, the good one. This one has the DC, obviously, the DC Universe attached to it, and it's got a very complex system for how you build your character and your powers. You can build whatever you want, and fun fact, you can actually build a speedster in here and accidentally kill yourself during character creation by going too fast with the speed force. So, I mean, there's a lot to play around with in there, and I think that's really fun, you know? You could say, oh, well, you know, I don't want to do that, my character died, I put a lot of work into this. And you say, you know, it's alright, just keep making them. But it's a fun little thing like that, that really enters you into the world. But it's got a very complex system of mechanics that's all laid out for you right there. Using them in-game is actually pretty easy. You just start adding more and more and more d6s until you go crazy with it. And as far as building the world up around you, there's not too much of that in this book. It's already kind of laid out with the DC comics, the DC shows, movies. You're kind of expected to know some of that going into it. And for the game, it works really well that way. You can have a lot of fun with a lot of complex mechanics where you're stacking up abilities and boosting those abilities and having your powers drained and things like that. So it's a more crunchy system where I'd put it at about 60% crunch, maybe 40% smooth, and by having a real definitive answer about what it is, I feel like you get a more complete game out of it than you do for Dungeons & Dragons. But we'll look at some more and you can tell me what you think of those yourself. Another one I've got a digital copy of. So one that I actually got through the Rain Support digital bundle on DriveThruRPG is Night Witches. Night Witches is a game based around the World War II Russian female pilots that would fly World War I planes with the engines turned off at night and drop bombs by hand onto German camps and German soldiers. I mean, fantastic World War II badasses right there. So, now, rules-wise, in this game, you're rolling 2d6s for certain instances, and certain characters have bonuses for those, but the real focus is to throw yourself into the shoes of these pilots, these women, and, you know, explore the world that they were living and go on an adventure and fight the war and try and defeat the Nazis. And in that way, and in the book itself, you have a lot of good information about the characters, about these pilots, these real people that actually fought in this war, and you kind of get to step into their shoes and focus real heavily on the unit that they've created, their relationships along the way, and, you know, really stretch your legs as a role player. Whereas the dice system works well for it. You know, if there's an encounter with a random element or an enemy or it's very difficult, you're going to roll dice for it. But that's about all. There's not going to be any kind of, you know, hardcore rules. Oh, you're going to have to, you know, calculate weight load, you're going to have to calculate this. There's not a lot of that. It's just roll when an encounter pops up. And that makes it for a very smooth experience where the DM can, you know, go through a game, explain the situation, you can make your choices and jump right into them. So that's another good example of where the other side of the role-playing game, role-playing, can be very fun just almost on its own. So that one settles somewhere around probably 80% smooth, 20% crunchy. almost entirely role-playing and seeing what you can do with your characters and building this story, this narrative. Now let's look at one that we've got a little more insight on here at the channel, Don't Rest Your Head. So if you go back and watch the How to Play Don't Rest Your Head, you can see there's a pretty complex die system, a very unique one that I haven't seen in other games, and there's a good amount of back and forth between the narrator and the players. There's a large focus in the game for the players to push the narrative along themselves. And I think that's really great. That's a great part of it. The narrator, the game master, the GM, DM is there to facilitate, is to tell you the setting, and your job is to jump up on the stage with your character and do whatever you're going to do in any RPG. So Don't Rest Your Head is a special case where you've got this very crunchy system that once you get a hold of it, you're going to say, ah, okay, well, it works this way. But at the same time, there's not a lot of character building. You can't just add a new power or a feat or a edge that's going to enhance your character in one department. It's very set with, this is what you can do. Hopefully you can do something with it. Hopefully you don't die. So if I had to put a number to it, I think I'd put Don't Rest Your Head somewhere around, let's see, probably about 40% crunchy and 60% smooth, because the setting is so essential. Getting that vibe, that dark, ominous feeling, that little itch at the back of your spine is quintessential to what it's really going to mean to play Don't Rest Your Head. Whereas the mechanics, while complicated, aren't very large. There's no way to expand them. Once you get them and see the flow of the game, it really plays into the role-playing itself. When did you fall down? Oh, what a day. And finally today, I want to take a quick look at one of my favorites, the Mouse Guard role-playing game. Oh man, what a game. So in Mouse Guard, you play mice that are trying to, intelligent mice, that are trying to survive their world. You know, they're fighting off snakes, badgers, they're with the weasel wars. They're fighting off all of these other creatures and trying to eke out a living and survive. Character building itself is very, very smooth and integrated with the game and the world, where your character, the first thing you're going to look at was, where were they born? Oh, well, you were born over here. They're really good at building ships over there, so you probably have something for that. Who are your parents? What did they do for a living? What are your hobbies? Which is kind of your freebie, where you get to pick whatever you want. And eventually, you build up to the point where your character is ready to go just from the things that have involved their life. And it's done really well, and it fits so well with the setting, the very down-home, almost country feeling of Mouse Guard, where you're fighting to defend this home, and the Mouse Guard themselves are a loose, almost ragtag bunch of mice that defend people traveling. They trailblaze, they fight off larger creatures like hawks and owls, even sparrows, or all kinds of things you wouldn't normally think about being such a huge danger until you get down to this scale. Mouse Guard's die system is very complex. It's easy to get a hold of once you build your character and, you know, take a look at what the dice do and everything like that. It's very easy to track it with the little bit that's on your character sheet. But really, the system plays into the world so well with all of its different rules for traveling, with going on the adventure itself, finding the path. There are no roads between the different cities per se. It's just pathways through nature, which they're so small it's hard for them to really, you know, carve a path through a field when you're this big. And I think Mouse Guard is a very good middle ground between crunchy and smooth, almost at 50-50, probably 60-40 or even 65-35. But despite all my praise for it, there's not a lot of magic in Mouse Guard at all. It's debatable whether magic exists in this world whatsoever. It's very Arthurian. All the magic is wrapped in legend, and things are very explainable. So someone who's a weather reader might just be a meteorologist. They've just learned how to read the clouds and the winds, and they know when it's going to rain or when it's going to be extra hot. And it's presented in such a way where the creatures and the peoples of the book might think it's magic, but it's really fairly just complex stuff in their world. And that might not be what everyone's looking for out of a fantasy game. Maybe you just want to sit there and play as mice and fight off big creatures, but maybe you're looking for something with a lot more magic. Maybe that's why you came to fantasy. And that's what I really want to tackle on some more reviews that we do on RPGs here on the channel. I want to go through lots of different ones and take a look, you know, is this what you're looking for out of an RPG? Because this one has it, and this one has this, and that one has that. And really give you an idea of what you're going to get out of each one by jumping into it or showing it to your group so that you all can play it and enjoy it together. So that's a quick look of how we're going to be doing RPG reviews here on the channel. I hope that you're interested in it, and if you're not, let me know down in the comments. But for the most part, we're going to be trying to cover all of these RPGs very in depth, where you can see really what you're going to get out of it and what's going to be offered to you when you jump into it. So you're not really surprised once you get 6 or 5 or 4, however many people are in your group interested in it, and then, oh, there's no magic, by the way, or oh, it's almost entirely political, there's no combat whatsoever, which is, you know, something I might like, but it might not be something the rest of your friends like. So look forward to that. We're going to be doing a lot more videos and reviews of RPGs. In the past, I've put out some stuff about my RPG, and I'm going to slow down on that because the more I try and put content out, I realize how much more work I have to do to make it presentable. I have the rules pinned down, I have the races, I've got a lot of religion and world building, but me hand drawing the map doesn't look nearly as good as my artist hand drawing the map. So we're going to wait off on that for a little bit and get some more stuff built up for it, some more content that you can actually see rather than me just narrating out, hey, this is really cool about my game, and you go, oh cool. Whereas I could show you a picture and you go, oh wow, that looks amazing, tell me more. So we're going to be waiting off on the stuff for my personal RPG for a little while and just focusing more on RPGs and what's going to get you into it and how you can enjoy it. So if you liked the video, like, share, and subscribe. I would definitely appreciate it, and we hope to see you in the next one. Thanks. I'm gonna keep dabbing off hot as shit in here.